Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So on today's episode, I have got Matthew Lumdsen. Now, I'm absolutely over the moon that I've got him on. So Matthew is the CEO of Connected Energy. And we've been trying to do this for a little while, Matthew, haven't we? But we've finally got you on. Thank you.
Sorry for making it so difficult. Oh, that's a very friendly start. So thank you about that. Thank you for that. It's a pleasure pleasure to be talking to you.
Thank you. And like I say, so I'd been watching Connected Energy on social media for some time, and maybe there's probably a lot of people that do recognise the name, but might not necessarily know what you do. Let's just start off, and I always do this on the podcast anyway. Give me a little bit of your background. You're up in the northeast, aren't you? Mm-hmm. You're up in Newcastle. What do you do? What's been your journey to get to where you are now as CEO of Connected Energy?
Okay, right. So go right back to about 1985. I read a Greenpeace report about acid rain. And being really keen on the environment, wildlife and stuff, that was a complete flip point in my life, and I decided I wanted to do something about that. So ultimately came to the university in Newcastle upon Tyne in about 86. Spent a bit of time in the construction industry, but started getting into renewables and environmental stuff in about 2000. So joined up with some guys who were building a consultancy business, TNEI, and that was involved in consenting for wind farms, doing a lot of work on grid connections for wind farms and PV, and ultimately in offshore wind as well. So I was instrumental, part of the growth of that, part of the management team and the investor base of that. So we got to about 2010. Just before then, I think 2009, I was working with One North East, which is the regional development agency in the North East at the time. And they were starting to look at how to support Nissan in moving the Leaf plant and the battery plant to the northeast of England.
Right.
So I got involved in working with One North East a lot at that point in time. So we put big bids into what was the technology strategy board at the time. Which is the equivalent of Innovate UK, for a big trial for the first Nissan Leafs. And then One North East put a big bid into what was plugged in places at the time, which was the first infrastructure trials. And we brought those two together, and we actually sold TNEI in 2010, and I set up Future Transport Systems, which was created to run these trials. So we got involved in obviously supporting the North East infrastructure trial, but also we were involved in the East of England plugged in places trial. We delivered the big, what was called Switch EV, which was the big fleet trial in the North East. Got involved in some more in Europe, and one linked in with Low Carbon London, big trial down there as well. So delivered and project managed a couple of big trials, but having built a consultancy business, I didn't really want to go down that project management consultancy route. Wanted to get involved in developing some technology and building a technology business. So we looked at two things really. One was vehicle to grid, and the other was second life batteries. So we did a vehicle to grid trial. This was back in probably about 2012, something like that, with 6 of the DNOs.
Wow.
We converted a vehicle to enable the vehicle to do V2G, and then we tried doing various different flexibility services to the grid through that. And we also got involved, we recognised that there was going to be this flow of second life batteries, and we also recognised already that there was going to be a problem with grid constraints on infrastructure.
Yes.
And from my previous background, we'd done a lot of work on smart grids and storage, and those were both a bit of a thing of the future at the time, but but there was a lot of things that seemed to be joining up. So we thought vehicle to grid had a lot of regulatory integration challenges there that probably didn't play to our skill set. So decided to focus on proof of concept stuff around second life batteries. And I guess the first thing was we were really lucky in winning a contract with DEC at the time, the Department of Energy and Climate Change, to do a large scale energy storage demonstrator project. And that was the first phase. So we built a system that had about 6 different types of battery in it, built a control system, linked that up with EV chargers, PV and a micro wind turbine, developed some microgrid control software, and proved the concept. And I guess it was at that point that we said, okay, well, did a bit more research, but let's try and move away from all the consultancy and project management stuff, and let's see if we can make a business around second life batteries.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, and
That's amazing.
We're getting there at the moment.
So you've been a pioneer of this, haven't you? Then for such a long time.
Not just me, the business has, and I can't claim that it was my idea, but I think connected energy has been probably one of the very first to get involved in second life, and I think it's a challenging space because you've got to align a lot of different stakeholders, and they have to recognise the requirement or the opportunity. So we've spent a lot of time getting the right investors, getting the right group of stakeholders, getting the right group of friends of connected energy to get to the point where we can scale up the business. But I guess what we've really done over the last few years is prove the technology at a smaller scale, so sort of smaller units for industrial and commercial type applications. But we're now at the point where we're scaling up that technology to utility scale systems. And then obviously we can really start to deal with the volume of second life batteries that's going to emerge in the next 5 years, I guess.
So can you take, is it all XEV batteries then that you're taking, or is it different? Yeah,
so all the batteries we use are X electric vehicle batteries. So we're using a lot of batteries from Renault at the moment. So we've used their Fluence batteries, their Kangoo batteries. We're working with Zoe batteries at the moment. We've also done work with Jaguar I-Pace batteries, and we've just joined an APC funded project with Nissan. So we'll be working with Nissan on some of their batteries, and then also working with Volvo as well. And we have other investors in our business, Caterpillar and Hinduja, who I guess will also have a flow of batteries at some point as well. And we'll start working with them hopefully in the future.
So can you, this might sound a really silly question, have you got to use like all Nissan batteries or all Jaguar batteries, or can you kind of, is it a bit like a pick and mix? Do can you actually have?
To a certain extent. So our control system, so we'll start off. So we only use a battery pack. So we take the battery pack exactly as it came out of the vehicle, exactly as it was designed by the OEM. We don't change it in any way at all. So we use all of their safety systems. But obviously, you'll have seen them. Battery packs are all different shapes and sizes. They have different cooling systems. They have different voltages. So our control architecture enables us to integrate with these batteries, so long as the OEMs will provide us with the information to do that. So we can work with any battery, except that obviously they need to be packaged in different ways. They need to be cooled in different ways. So we design battery containers for a specific type of battery, and then they can all be plugged into a common interface with the grid, or more or less common interface with the grid.
So there's obviously there's this question about how many miles do you get before a battery starts degrading, and there's a lot of negativity around battery life. But when you get that used battery, how many miles on average do you think it's probably done? I mean, or is that finger in the air?
I honestly have no idea.
Okay.
Typically we're finding that The bus and truck batteries are likely to come to us after about 8 years of use. And typically they're on something like an 8-year warranty, and that guarantees a maximum level of degradation of 20%. I'm sure that varies, but that's what we're being told by quite a few people. And that's good. So you use a bus and truck battery, then it has a fairly clear duty cycle. So it has a fairly predictable level of degradation over a period of time. We have very good visibility of how it's being used and what condition the battery should be in, and we have a pretty good view of when the battery will become available. Personal vehicles are much more difficult because obviously the duty cycle, most of the time they're stuck in people's drives or on the side of the road not doing anything. So they're actually lasting a lot longer than everybody expected. And also there's far less visibility on how the batteries have been used. So we obviously, we were really lucky because we started working with Renault, and Renault leased their batteries. So we did have good visibility via Renault of those batteries, but starting to work with batteries that have come out of the personal vehicle fleet is really difficult because the visibility of when they'll become available, where they are, and the condition of the batteries is far more challenging than with commercial vehicles. So we'll ultimately move towards the commercial side where we've got that visible supply chain of batteries, and then therefore we know how we can scale up our business.
So I was talking to somebody recently about kind of the fact that probably in future EV batteries are probably going to have like a battery life certificate. So when it goes into the used market, that's it. Yeah. So actually, and I'm going to be talking to a guy in a few weeks about this, about how that will work, because actually, in some ways, to me, it gives and I'm a used EV buyer. That's what our car was when we bought it. It would give me, if I'd have realised, giving you a lot more satisfaction and kind of comfort in the fact that what battery life that is. And ours is only was 2 years old when we bought it.
Yeah.
But typically, then, what percentage do you get them at then, or does it just kind of vary?
So it varies a bit, but I guess we get them between very little level of degradation. Some potentially even as little as 5% degraded, probably down to a maximum of about 75. But this is where the second life as the volumes increase, the second life business will start to focus on the better batteries.
Yes.
And obviously some of those will go into the second-hand vehicle market, but we will stop using the more degraded batteries probably and start focusing on the cream of the crop.
So I've kind of looked at your website as well for everybody who's listening. It's connected-energy.co.uk, and I can see it. What you're doing just looks amazing. And there's one that I'm just looking at now, which is like a container with all the gubbins inside it. Yeah. So how would this work? Who takes these? And is this kind of like are you using this as a support to the grid or to that organisation? Whereabouts are you actually using them?
So a wide range of applications, and we've designed the system so it can do pretty much anything that a first life lithium-ion battery energy storage system can do. But I guess there's sort of three types of applications. So one is people can just plug the systems into the grid. They can provide flexibility services into the grid, and they can generate revenue from that. So it's kind of, if you've got a grid connection, then you can make some money out of that grid connection if you've got some surplus capacity in there.
Yeah.
The other application is really focused on problem solving. So
my favourite thing.
If you're installing EV charging infrastructure, then typically, particularly if you're putting a hub, there won't be the connection capacity on the network to take that the power that's required for those chargers. So you could potentially upgrade the grid, but often that takes quite a long time and can be very expensive, and potentially might be something that you would like to leave until you're really, making your business model around the charging infrastructure work and generating some good revenue out of that. So something that you could do either as a long-term or an interim step is install energy storage systems. And what that does is effectively enables you to pull the maximum power out of the grid, but then supplements that with power coming out of the energy storage system. So we've got a number of projects like that are either purely managing the grid load of EV chargers, and we've just sort of announced we're putting a couple of systems in on Volvo dealership sites or Volvo workshop sites, where they can provide or they can supplement the power required for charging buses and trucks. But then there's others where people are co-locating EV chargers, PV canopies, etc. We've got a project like that in Dundee, where that's being done to manage the grid load, but also enables you to bring all of that green energy into your charging, so carbonising the charging of the fleet. And I suppose the final one is we've got quite a few projects where people are just looking to optimize an overall site system. So we've got a project at Cranfield, so they've got a big commercial test site. They've got some big peak loads. They've got PV, which can't export. So they're using it to manage or eliminate the export from the PV by using it on site and also storing it if necessary, but then also managing some big peak loads as well to just overall optimize the balance of energy use on the site. And we've got 3 systems on that site, so we can either control each of the individual systems independently to specifically solve a problem on the site, or we can operate them all as one system, potentially use that for providing more capacity to provide flexibility to the grid. So quite a wide range of use of applications there.
It's amazing. So right, obviously all batteries need topping up, don't they? It's like my EV battery, I need to top it up when the miles go down, got 30-mile range or whatever, and I charge it. So on average, what would you... Are they set up mostly to be used with PV, solar PV, or can you plug them into other renewables, or are they topped up from the grid, or does it depend what mix you want?
Whichever. Yeah. I mean, we just suck in electrons, so they can be from the grid or from PV or wind or whatever, or CHP. So it's really just it's a way of providing a bit of flexibility around an energy system. And we have this thing which we call our microgrid control software, which enables us to track different assets on the site and put a hierarchy of rules in there, so that if we detect that the PV is exporting, for example, we could start to charge the battery to stop that export, or if we sense that the load is getting close to a grid constraint, we can start discharging the battery to provide a bit more energy into the system, and we can set that on a temporal basis, so it does certain things at different times as well. So it's all about fitting the energy storage into the overall system to provide the best effect. And some sites are really focused on decarbonisation.
Yes.
So that's around, it might not necessarily be the strongest commercial business case, but actually you can use the energy slightly differently to maximise the use of the PV or whatever on site, or capitalise on the carbon intensity of the grid. So there's all sorts of ways you can do it.
Oh, it's just so exciting. I need to see this. I really, really need to see this, honestly. So
You're very welcome to come and visit a project.
I'd love to. I really, really would. We'll have to talk about this afterwards. So how many kilowatts, what size systems are we talking about? So obviously, if you've got something that fills up a whole container,
Yeah.
how many kilowatts is
So,
that?
so, so, so obviously, when we started our first batteries that we're using now are obviously quite early battery
Mm,
technology.
mm,
So the energy density is much lower than it is now. So if you imagine a Nissan Leaf battery, for example, I might get the exact numbers wrongly, but the first generation I think were about 24 kilowatt hours.
mm.
The latest generation I think are 60 kilowatt hours, and they're more or less in the same form factor of battery. So you can see from that that the energy density of the batteries has really increased. So our e-store systems, which are what you've seen on our website, are relatively low energy density. So there's 360 kilowatt hours of energy in there. But we're working on a system at the moment that will have probably close to a megawatt and a half of energy in the same form factor. So as we bring in more and more up-to-date batteries, then the energy density starts to increase. But it will always be a bit of a challenge with Second Life in that we will never have the energy density of a new system because we're
Yeah.
always a little bit behind, and also we're dealing with the additional packaging of an EV battery pack.
So on average, then, what time scale? How long would this? What is the lifetime on this? When you're going into Second Life, what's
Yeah.
the lifetime of Second Life?
So it depends a lot on the duty cycle, obviously, but probably our shortest term project is one that's going to last about 5 years because it's doing very aggressive peak shaving on an array of EV chargers. And we're really pushing it hard, in part to learn how the batteries will perform. But then I think as we get to um, systems focusing more on longer duration cycles, so perhaps energy trading or working with PV, then we're probably going to be moving, to close to 10 years. Our typical business model is based on around a 7-year lifespan, but I think we'll be moving out probably longer than that.
So can this be can this be self-sustaining without a long term without that grid upgrade, requirement? Can that just can you so you because you said earlier, didn't you, that actually if companies, because it's a big expense and it takes a long time to upgrade
Yeah.
your grid connections. If you decided not to do that, could you just keep working using your Second Life batteries then?
It really depends on the ratio of the grid connection capacity and the load required from the chargers or whatever, and the size of the storage systems. But my gut feeling is, as you get to really big hubs, then you are going to need to upgrade the connection as well.
Yeah.
But by the same token, adding storage in there to start managing because the cost of connections tends to go up in steps. So you might be able to avoid going up into another big step of cost by putting storage in there. So I think
Yeah.
it's a really good short-term solution to enable you to install infrastructure relatively quickly and avoid that first step in connection cost. But I think also at the next level, you might be able to avoid a very significant additional cost in upgrade by potentially taking the connection right back to the transmission system by putting storage in there just to manage the real sort of spikes in load. So I think it's got an evolving role in the EV charging piece, certainly.
Because it's you're kind of giving that ability, that buffer, aren't you?
Yeah.
For when and I can see this as such a benefit specifically for EV charging. Anyway, you are giving that level of support and buffer to the system. Does the actual so for example, eStore, is that managing all of the hub, for example, or does it kind of say, like, you've got 10 chargers there? Will it manage, say, for what I'm trying to say is, if there are 10 cars, 10 EVs sat at 10 chargers, does it manage it? Does it balance the load, or
So
that kind of way?
it can operate in a number of different ways. So we can either use grid load management software in there as well to limit the amount of power that's being distributed by the chargers, and we can combine that with the storage, or we can just track the amount of load that's being pulled through the feeder and manage that as a single point of load. But we're also got sites where we're directly integrating with the EV chargers. So we're communicating either via OCPP or Modbus, and that enables us to actively control the charger. So, for example, we've got a couple of sites where if somebody plugs the plug into their vehicle, the system will check whether there's capacity available at the feeder, and if there isn't capacity available, we'll start to discharge the unit to make sure there's more power available, and then we'll let the charger start to charge the vehicle. So there's a number of different iteration or versions of the way we can control that.
Oh, this is so clever. I just love it. I get really
Go to my
excited.
head.
Honestly, it's brilliant, because actually having that ability to support the system, the network.
I think for me, the exciting thing is also just to do with the whole EV ecosystem. So by giving the batteries a second life, we can improve their residual value, which that feeds into the upfront fleet financing model. So that should ultimately make fleets more, accessible for people from a financial perspective. And then we can provide, obviously, that additional second life revenue to whoever owns the batteries or sells them to us. And then obviously that also delays the move into recycling. And hopefully, recycling will obviously get better and better and better. And the economics will change. Potentially people will be paid for their batteries. So hopefully we can improve that overall lifetime economic model for a battery, improve the extent to which they're recycled, but then also there's obviously a move to incorporate more recycled material into the new build. Yes. So that material can then be fed back into the new build. So and obviously we're enabling the uptake of EVs by providing a relatively simple approach to grid load management as well. So it has a nice circularity to it.
So I was going to say, so with regard, you just said about the fleets then, and then fleets can build it into their cost. Are we also talking going right back to the OEMs? Going right back to the EV manufacturers? Do they kind of think about that moving forward yet, or is that something that's not quite happening yet?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of versions. So some of the OEMs are financing the fleets or financing the batteries on behalf of the customers. So they might be providing the battery in there as a service. But ultimately, if you're an EV OEM and you've got a second life solution for your batteries, then that improves the business case for whoever is buying your vehicles, and it also gives you a few more improves your sustainability credentials around your proposition to the customer, I guess.
It makes so much sense if they can kind of build that in. And I hope it's not the elephant in the room. What I was going to ask you mentioned about recycling second life batteries. Is it right? Okay, so when you've got to the end of that 10 years, for example, that you're going to use it for, is there anywhere that would take a third life, or is it just are they all depleted, or is that when you have to recycle it?
I mean, I think they're going to be recycled because I think by the time by the time we've finished with them, the technology is probably going to be 20 years old, maybe even more. So there may be there may be components there that are reusable that would perhaps go back into the service supply chain. But I guess the vast majority is then come to the point in life where it's going to be recycled.
And how does that work currently for recycling second-hand batteries?
So there's various different models. And I think the first phase is obviously. A lot of it is. There are several routes. Some where the batteries are completely disassembled and recycled separately. There's other parts where the batteries are effectively fed into machines and crushed, and the black mass is then distributed and processed. So I think I'm not an expert on recycling by any stretch of the imagination, but we seem to be at that phase in the industry where a few models are being developed, and ultimately the ultimate solution I don't think is been finalised yet, shall we say?
No, it'd be good to see that the innovation that comes out of that as well. So
yeah,
I was going to talk to you about. So you mentioned about Dundee Council, haven't you, and Swarco, and some of the fantastic projects that you've been involved in. What would you say is the kind of the penultimate, the pinnacle project that you've actually got to and gone, we've done this. That was fantastic. We didn't think we could do that, and we have. Have you got one? Or are they all like that? They're all like that, aren't they?
Well, they're all a big step forward, So I suppose, we've got a 1.2 megawatt system on Umicore's recycling plant in Belgium. We installed that a couple of years ago. But, that was exciting because it's a real illustration of the circular economy.
Yes.
Or the potential for just from a visual perspective. But the systems we're installing now are sort of, each system has a different degree of integration, and we prove another level of sophistication in the technology. So to be honest, they're all exciting. But this year we'll be building our first sort of much larger scale system, which will be designed to be a step up into utility scale. So we're moving into sort of systems that will be 50, 100 megawatts. So obviously much, much larger than we're building now. And it's about translating the control systems and everything into bigger systems. So we'll be building our first sort of demonstration site later on this year. And that's really important because it's not only developing the technology at scale, but we're also putting together all the contractual commercial pieces around the system so that it's then scalable and replicable. So that's a big step forward for the business this year. And ultimately, what does that mean? That means that when this flow of batteries really ramps up, which we think will probably be from about 2027, we'll be in a position to take huge volumes of batteries and deploy those at scale. So that'll be an exciting point for the business, really, where we move on to the next step.
Look forward to seeing all this.
It's also exciting for us because we've also set up a development side of the business. So this will also be our project. We're financing it, and that'll be the first one of those that we financed ourselves.
Fantastic. And you said to me you've got about 40. There's about 40 of you working in the business now, aren't there?
42, yes. So
42.
We've doubled in the last 18 months.
That's amazing. So, and the sectors that you're working with, so it's not just EV charging and local councils. You've got kind of, how does it work with the ports and harbours? So because you've got ports and harbours on here, you've got kind of universities, and obviously, your kind of links with Newcastle Uni.
Yeah, I mean, ports and harbours have got a real challenge on their hands because they've got to electrify, they've got to improve air quality, they've got to reduce the amount of emissions they're putting into the water, etc. So, so they have they're now starting to have to provide, electric feeds onto ships so they're not running their diesel engines while they're in ports, etc.
Yeah.
So they've got a real move to electrification, which is fundamentally changing their energy infrastructure. And things like cranes are all electrifying, and they put a big peak load on the grid, etc. And obviously, but ports have a lot of space, I guess, in general. So they have space for renewables. Quite a lot of them are putting wind turbines on their sites and PV and storage, etc. So, we think storage has a real potential on ports and harbours to help manage that really varying grid load, but then also to capitalise on some of that space to generate renewable energy and maximise its value by co-locating it with storage as well. So we're talking to quite a few ports at the moment about various different solutions to help manage that new energy system, I suppose.
Sounds
and
brilliant.
Also there's another interesting thing is that obviously our batteries are designed for use in EVs, and quite often they're exposed to the elements, and obviously you get quite obviously the air around the sea is very salty.
Yes.
It can be a real issue for corrosion. So our batteries are obviously protected against that corrosion problem because they're in packs. So there's quite a good fit there as well.
Yeah, I was going to say I interviewed a chap called Derek McGlashan, who's a consultant working with ports and the kind of different port authorities last year, and I was amazed when he told me that I should have realised this, but he said when a cruise ship comes into port, it's kind of like powering a city, you know. So actually, if you can kind of support that, that would be a fantastic move, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, and it's a huge amount of power and incredibly expensive grid upgrade required to do that. So some of that can easily be supplemented with storage.
Do you know, I was going to talk to you because we had a quick chat, didn't we, before we started recording? You were just talking about the opportunities for the younger generation, because you've got a son who's second year of university doing chemistry degree, and my son will be going to university in September, hopefully to Exeter, studying biology. What are your thoughts on kind of everything? There's so much out there, isn't there, for the younger generation now?
Where to start? Yeah. So I think as I said, we've doubled the size of the business in the last 18 months, and we've brought in a lot of younger people into the business, but also some sort of more mature people, and I think we just had as I said earlier on, we had an away day a couple of weeks ago where we had everybody together in one room for a change, because we're split across a couple of sites. And I mean, compared with, working 20 years or so ago, where, a lot of people, I feel, came to, they wanted a career, but they came to work for their career and for the money. Whereas now, everybody in the business is motivated around making a difference. And, quite a lot of the more mature people are wanting to say, okay, well, I've done that. I now want to make a difference. Or a lot of the younger people are really motivated by climate change, etc., etc. So you just end up in a completely different. Connected Energy is a completely different environment from any other company I have ever worked in before. To the level of motivation of the staff, and okay, we have to foster that because people are so difficult to get at the moment, but it's just such an exciting environment to work in with people who are motivated by a bigger cause. I think one of the things that frustrates me is that, quite rightly, everybody talks about the peril of climate change, and that's absolutely right. But there are also some massively exciting opportunities attached to it.
Absolutely.
And as always, when we're British, we don't shout about the exciting stuff. We just shout about the problems,
We do. We're very good at moaning, aren't we?
Yeah, we've got the leading, globally, we've got the leading offshore wind industry. We've got all sorts of exciting stuff. So, I think getting younger people involved in this and communicating the opportunities, whether it's, chemistry or electrical engineering or biosciences or whatever, that there is just so much growth there to get involved with. So, it frustrates me that I don't think that's communicated enough, and we're trying to do our bit in that space anyway.
No, you're right. You are right. We are very good at having a good old moan about stuff, aren't we? And
Yeah,
actually, I think in some ways, and I said this to you before we started recording, didn't I? Some things are partly to do with the media and the way that the media portrays climate change and net zero and EVs and
yeah,
everything, and renewable energy and wind farms and all of this and the kind of the not in my backyard type
yeah,
thinking, the NIMBY approach. But I would love to know. I would love to know what the percentage of the UK was that had that way of thinking
yeah,
versus
yeah.
the percentage of the UK that is open-minded to these things and recognise them as a positive. But we don't see that, do we?
No, I mean, the only sort of, I guess, interesting observation is when I used to work in onshore wind and we were doing planning consents, planning applications for onshore wind farms, then you tended to find that you got less objections for people who already lived close to wind turbines than you did from people who were, miles away. So I think, I reckon I think it's probably a binary thing with wind turbines. I think they're fantastic. I can understand people not liking them, but I think awareness is absolutely fundamental to people's decision making, and I'm just not sure there's enough information and experience there for people to make the best decisions at the moment.
You're
But
right.
obviously, I'm biased, so
No, I think you're right, actually. And I've got to say, I think wind turbines are magnificent. They're
yeah,
just,
me
I
too.
could just look at them and just go, wow, look at that. Actually, and if you see them on the back of a lorry, when they're actually when they're kind of
Yeah,
when the turbine's being delivered, they're enormous. That and
they're
actually, if you
phenomenal.
take it back, a company or companies are manufacturing those massive,
Yeah,
big beasts. And actually, again, it just takes me back to think all of this stuff, all of everything that we're doing currently is just innovation. I think the British, we are pretty decent innovators, to be honest. We might bitch and moan a bit, don't we? But
yeah.
we're pretty decent innovators.
I think we're good at innovation. Where we tend to struggle a little bit is on the step from innovation to large scale commercialization, and that's quite often where we tend to go elsewhere to do it. But yeah, to be fair, I mean, I think people like Innovate UK, certainly Innovate UK have provided us with phenomenal support. So they've really helped us in terms of funding, mentoring, etc., etc. So there are mechanisms there to help. There's no doubt about that.
That's good, and that's what organisations like yourselves and other companies who are trying to do the right thing in the right sectors. That's what you need, isn't it?
Yeah,
What
exactly.
what would you like to see connected energy become over the next kind of 5-10 years? Then how do you see the development of the organisation?
So I think we are now at the bottom of the hockey stick. Because it's taken longer for the batteries to come through than we expected. We've had to spend a couple of years really focusing on smaller systems, and I guess, but that's been positive because we've got the technology very mature now. The next phase is really about, and I think the other thing that has really changed is that a lot of the either battery or EV OEMs, or even people who own a lot of batteries because they're financing fleets, have started to see this point in time where they're going to have a load of batteries and what are they going to do about them. So 2 years ago, we were knocking on people's doors saying, have you thought about this? Now they're knocking on our doors, asking us to figure out how to solve the problem. And in many ways, our business model has changed from saying, okay, our core customer is people who want to buy energy storage systems. Now, really, our core customer is people with shed loads of batteries who want to monetize them, which is great, and we're starting to build some really exciting partnerships. So in terms of connected energy, our focus now is really on scaling up the business. So I think we've got sort of 2 or 3 years of really getting to that first phase of scaling up, and then it will be sort of moving into different markets, so probably moving outside Europe, and working very closely with specific EV OEMs to create, scalable solutions in their various different markets. And we're really lucky in that we've got, in the investors in the business, we have, Volvo, Caterpillar, Hinduja, who are, have that visibility on the battery side. And then we have NG, who's obviously a big global utility, who really understand about the deployment of batteries and the value in them. Then we have people like Mercuria and Macquarie, who finance systems, and then Sumitomo and a few others who also have a bit of an interest in the recycling piece. So we've got that sort of spread of stakeholders in the boardroom who can help us sort of pitch our proposition to span the full value chain, and that's been really valuable. It was a real challenge getting them all on board, but it was worth every bit of toil, I suppose. So it's very exciting times.
Oh, it just sounds so fantastic. And like I say, I really want to come and see the sites. In fact, I've also got Fraser Crichton, who's going to be, I'm assuming you worked with Fraser. Yeah. So he's going to be out on the podcast over the next couple of weeks. Okay. So people who are watching and listening to this, you'll work it out, because Fraser will be coming out a few weeks before this one. But I'd like to go and see his site, because that's where you are, and that's where all your stuff is. And excellent. I think that'd be amazing. Now, if people want to find you and they want to contact you because if they're interested in utilising working with connected energy with Second Life batteries, where would you like them to look? Do they just need to look on the website?
Go to the website, yeah. I mean, we sort of, as the business evolves, we're trying to, Anya's heads up our marketing. She's fantastic. Yes. She keeps the website very much up to date on painting the picture of where the business is at the moment. So that's definitely the first port of call, and then sign up for a newsletter, and we'll keep you posted on all of our latest developments.
Fantastic. And are you a frequenter of LinkedIn?
I am, yes. Terrible thing that it is.
Isn't all social media? so actually, if we keep an eye out for you on LinkedIn as well. That's true.
Yeah, right? Yeah. We've got a lot of updates on LinkedIn.
And I will share all of your links and everything like that in the show notes. But definitely, everybody who's watching and listening, have a look at the websites. Again, connected-energy.co.uk. Just looking at it, it's a really, really robust website. There's so much information on it. But yeah, it's brilliant to talk to such an innovative mind, Matthew. I really, really appreciate your time today.
Very kind of you to say so. Thanks for the invitation. I've enjoyed it.
Me too, and I hope everybody else has. I bet you've all got something out of this, because, like I say, I definitely have, and you can tell because I'm like a small child getting all excited. Honestly, but listen, Matthew, I'm going to say thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I'm going to say to everybody else, thank you for watching and listening, and I shall see you next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching this episode of Electric Evolution. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons to stay connected with us. And if you're inspired by our journey towards a sustainable future and want to support our mission on a monthly basis, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Electric Evolution Podcast. Your support really helps us to bring the latest insights and discussions in the world of clean energy, electric vehicle charging and sustainability to you. If a regular subscription isn't what you're looking for, you can always consider buying us a coffee. Just head over to www.buymeacoffee.com/Electric Evolution Podcast. Every cup helps us to keep the electric evolution moving forwards. And if you're curious about our work in the EV infrastructure sector at Full Circle Continuous Improvement, why not visit us at www.fullcircleci.co.uk to find out more. And if you want to send me a message, you can always email me on liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. And finally, please don't forget to share this podcast if it's sparked your interest. And let's keep spreading the word about all of these topics that we're covering. So, until next time, see you soon. Bye!